Causality as cognitive construction. We assume the world runs on cause and effect. Release an apple, it falls. Heat water, it boils. Every effect must have a cause. But what if causality is not a feature of reality? What if instead it is something the human mind has invented in order to survive the chaos of the universe? This is a topic I have been musing over for decades. So here I will expand on the radical idea that causality is not in the world, it is in our heads, and fundamental to human consciousness. To those that know me, it will come as no surprise that it was Friedrich Nietzsche that first sent me off on this path to denial. His Will to Power, section 523 on consciousness, shook me to the core. He said, "We lack any sensitive organs for this inner world, so we sense a thousandfold complexity as a unity. So we introduce causation where any reason for motion and change remains invisible to us. The sequence of thoughts and feelings is only their becoming visible in consciousness. That this sequence has anything to do with a causal chain is completely unbelievable. Consciousness has never furnished us with an example of cause and effect." Now, causality is one of the most deeply embedded assumptions in human thought. Nietzsche was not alone in his rejection. There is a long tradition of philosophical skepticism, culminating in contemporary critiques in physics, that challenges this assumption. Such provocative claims are not merely that causality is difficult to prove, rather that it does not exist independently in the world at all. Causality is a construct imposed by the human mind to make sense of an otherwise complex, non-linear, and ultimately unknowable reality. In line with this thinking, at the heart of Science's First Mistake, the book I wrote with my good friend Professor Dionysius Dametis, is a radical inversion of scientific realism. Rather than viewing science as uncovering causal structures in reality, we argue that science constructs a self-consistent but illusory framework shaped by the constraints of human cognition. Our central claim is that humans do not perceive causality directly. Instead, causality is a precondition for perception, a simplifying assumption that allows us to filter overwhelming sensory input into manageable narratives. As we put it, belief in causality is a necessary prerequisite of observation and cognition. To us, causality is a cognitive shortcut. The world itself is not linear or sequential in the way causal reasoning assumes. Rather, it is a complex system in which events are interdependent and nonlinear. The imposition of cause and effect relations is therefore a projection, not a discovery. This position draws heavily on systems theory and second-order cybernetics, particularly the work of Niklas Luhmann. Observation itself requires drawing distinctions between observer and observed, before and after, cause and effect. These distinctions create the very reality we purport to describe. Thus, causality is not found in the world, but arises from the act of observation. This idea that causality is not inherent in the world, but imposed by the mind, is not new. David Hume famously argued that we never perceive necessary connection, causation, directly, but only observe constant conjunction and infer causation through habit. Immanuel Kant took this further to argue that causality is an a priori category of the understanding that the mind imposes on experience, making coherent experience possible. When one event regularly follows another, we infer a causal link. But this inference is based on habit, not necessity. It is not derived from experience, but is a precondition for having any coherent experience at all. In Kant's framework, causality structures phenomena, but tells us nothing about, his famously said, things in themselves. Dionysius and I continue this line of thought. Where Kant preserves causality as a necessary feature of human cognition, we emphasize its illusory character. For us, causality is not just a structuring principle, rather a misleading one, an artifact that obscures the true complexity of reality. Humans invent doers behind actions, causes behind effects, because of grammatical structures that demand subjects and predicates. Causality is a narrative imposition, just as grammar simplifies experience into subject-verb-object relations. Causal reasoning simplifies reality into linear chains. However, they are not mirrors of the world. Bertrand Russell said, "The law of causality is a relic of a bygone age." Ludwig Wittgenstein treats causality as a feature of language, an explanation, not metaphysics. Now, while classical physics, particularly in the tradition of Isaac Newton, seemed to confirm a deterministic causal universe, modern physics has profoundly destabilized this picture. Relativity, developed by Albert Einstein, complicates the notion of temporal order. Events that are simultaneous in one frame of reference may not be in another, undermining a universal causal sequence. Quantum mechanics pushes this challenge further. In the works of Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg, the behavior of particles cannot be described in deterministic causal terms. Instead, outcomes are probabilistic, and the act of measurement plays a constitutive role. Recent theoretical work suggests that causality may not even be fundamental. In some approaches to quantum gravity, the cause-effect relation is considered misleading and potentially dispensable. Even historically, causality has receded into the background of successful physical theories. Dionysius and I emphasize that reality is inherently nonlinear and complex. In such systems, small changes can have disproportionate effects. Feedback loops blur cause and effect, and outcomes cannot be traced back to single origins. In this context, causal explanations become oversimplifications. They impose linearity on systems that are fundamentally networked and recursive. The world is not a chain of causes, rather a web of interactions. Systems theory posits phenomena such as emergence and self-organization that resist reduction to simple causal laws. Here, explanation shifts from what caused this to how do patterns arise from interactions? Now, despite these critiques, causality remains deeply entrenched in human thinking. It's indispensable for practical reasoning. Without causal assumptions, prediction and control become difficult, if not impossible. This raises an important question. If causality is a delusion, why is it so effective? One answer is pragmatic. Causality may not describe reality as it is, but it provides a useful heuristic for navigating that reality. Like a map, it simplifies its complexity in ways that enable action. The success of science may therefore reflect not the truth of causality, but its utility. Another answer is that human brains evolved to detect patterns and infer relationships. Causal reasoning is a natural extension of this capacity. It is not optional. It is built into the way we perceive and think. So, if causality is not fundamental, several implications follow. Number one, science cannot ultimately explain why things happen, only describe patterns of correlation and interaction. 2. Knowledge becomes provisional and perspective dependent rather than objective and universal. 3. The belief that we can control the world through causal manipulation is undermined. 4. Reality may be better understood in terms of relations, processes, or networks rather than causes. The critique of causality reveals a profound tension at the heart of human understanding. Causality is both indispensable and illusory, a necessary condition for cognition that does not correspond to an underlying feature of reality. We may never escape causality completely. The human mind seems wired to turn complexity into stories, patterns, and chains of cause and effect. Without those stories, prediction, science, morality, and even ordinary thought begin to collapse. But perhaps that is precisely the point. Causality may not be reality itself, only the cognitive scaffolding that allows us to function inside a reality too complex to comprehend directly. The universe may not be a machine of causes. It may be an immeasurable web of relations, interactions, probabilities, and emergent patterns that we continuously simplify into narratives so we can survive. And what led me to such a radical conclusion? Well, the numerous quotations found in the works of Friedrich Nietzsche. I'll finish with just 3. The world seems logical to us because we made it logical. Rational thought is interpretation according to a scheme that we cannot throw off. In his books, Nietzsche raised the most unsettling possibility. Unsettling is the word. Science has never explained reality. It has only described the version of reality that the human mind is capable of seeing. Let me finish with one final quotation. We call it explanation, but it is description which distinguishes us from earlier stages of knowledge and science. We describe better, we explain just as little as any who came before us. Thank you.